All right, welcome back. Episode 4 of the Token Launch Masterclass. Today's topic, jurisdictional arbitrage, choosing your legal home base. Look, before you even think about your tokenomics or your go-to-market strategy, you have to answer the most fundamental question. Where in the world are you planting your flag? I've personally seen brilliant projects get kneecapped because they treated this as an afterthought. This decision isn't just paperwork, it's the bedrock of your entire operation. It dictates your regulatory risk, your tax burden, whether a bank will even give you the time of day, and frankly, whether serious investors will take your call. Get this wrong, and you're building on quicksand. This is, without a doubt, one of the most critical strategic choices a founder will make. So let's break down this term. Jurisdictional arbitrage. It sounds a bit like a legal gray area, something you'd whisper about. But let's be absolutely clear. This isn't about evasion or hiding in the shadows. What I like to see is founders treating this as pure strategic positioning. You're simply selecting a legal home whose laws and regulations are the most favorable and clear for your specific project's goals. You might find it helpful to think of it like this. A traditional tech company has to decide where to set up shop. They might choose Silicon Valley to be near the best engineering talent, or they might choose a state like Delaware for its corporate-friendly laws and tax incentives. Neither is about hiding. It's about choosing the best environment to build and grow. That's precisely what we're doing here in the token space. So when I'm evaluating a potential home base, I break it down into what I call the Core Triad: regulation, taxation, and reputation. You have to look at all three. First, regulation. What I'm looking for here is clarity. Does the jurisdiction have clear, published rules that distinguish a utility token from a security? Do they have a legal framework for DAOs? Ambiguity is your enemy. Second, taxation. This isn't just about 0% corporate tax. You need to go deeper. What are the capital gains implications for your investors and founders? Is there a VAT on token transactions? You might find a seemingly good deal has hidden costs for your entire community. And finally, reputation. This is critical. How do major banks and exchanges view this jurisdiction? If it's on an international watch list, you could find it impossible to get a bank account or a Tier 1 exchange listing, effectively killing your project before it starts. So let's walk through our first case study, what I like to call the blue-chip jurisdictions, the established hubs. First up, the one everyone knows, Switzerland, home of Crypto Valley. The major advantage here is the clarity you get from their regulator, FINMA. They publish guidelines early, giving projects a clear path. The structure you'll almost always see is the Stiftung, or foundation model. It's the gold standard for reputation, but be prepared. That reputation comes with a higher price tag. Now, a place you might find offers even more legal precision is its neighbor, Liechtenstein. It's less famous, but their blockchain act is a masterpiece. It introduced something called the token container model, which essentially gives a digital token the properties of a legal container, creating incredible legal certainty. So you have a choice: the established brand name of Switzerland, or the surgical legal precision of Liechtenstein. Both are top-tier options. Now, let's move from the gold standard to what I often call the workhorses of token issuance, the efficient offshore jurisdictions. You'll see the Cayman Islands come up time and time again, and for good reason. What I like to see here is the use of an exempted foundation. It's a clean structure for issuing tokens, and the major draw is its tax neutrality, a huge plus for the Treasury. There's a solid body of legal precedent there, which provides a level of comfort. Just be aware their vast regulations are evolving, so it's a space to watch. On the other hand, you might find the British Virgin Islands, or BVI, is a better fit. Its main advantages are corporate flexibility and cost effectiveness. It's often a quicker and cheaper setup, and like Cayman, it has its own formal VASP regime, so it's a serious contender. Okay, so beyond the established offshore players, what I'm seeing now is a new category I call the rising stars. Jurisdictions actively competing to become the next global crypto hub. A prime example is the UAE. You have proactive regulators, like Vera in Dubai and the FSRA in Abu Dhabi's global market, creating really clear sandboxes. What I like is that you can pair this regulatory clarity with special economic zones and a zero-tax environment. You can really see the appeal for growth-focused projects. On the other side of that coin, you might find Singapore as a better fit if your primary target is institutional capital. Singapore's power is its rock-solid global reputation for rule of law, which is all underpinned by the MAS Payment Services Act. Serious money feels safe there. The trade-off? The process is definitely more stringent and formal. It's not a quick setup. So, you have a clear choice: the UAE's speed and tax efficiency, or Singapore's institutional stamp of approval. All right, so far we've covered the more traditional paths. But what I find really exciting is when we start thinking outside the box, especially for truly decentralized projects. If you're building a DAO, you're not just a company, you're a community. And some jurisdictions are starting to get that. What I like to see is projects looking at places like Wyoming in the US. They pioneered the Wyoming DAO LLC law. This is a game changer. It grants your DAO actual legal personality and, crucially, limited liability for its members, all within the world's largest economy. Now, if you want to push the envelope even further, you might look at a sovereign nation like the Marshall Islands. They passed national legislation that formally recognizes DAOs as legal entities. It's a bold move and definitely a less trodden path, but it shows where the future is heading. It's a pure play option for projects that are decentralized to their core. Okay, just as important as knowing where to go is knowing where not to plant your flag. What I do is create a no-go list based on a few key red flags. First, any jurisdiction with openly hostile or completely ambiguous crypto regulations is an immediate pass for me. If the rules are a moving target, you're just gambling. Another major red flag I watch for is capital controls. If there's a risk you can't move your treasury out of the country freely, the jurisdiction is a non-starter. But the ultimate deal breaker: seeing a country on an international watch list, like the FATF gray or blacklist. You might find that incorporating there makes getting a bank account or a Tier 1 exchange listing literally impossible. It's a surefire way to isolate your project from the global financial system before you've even begun. Now, let's move into a more advanced strategy, one that I see the most sophisticated projects implement. It's called the Foundation plus OpsCo model. What I like to see is a two-entity structure. First, you set up a nonprofit foundation in a tax-neutral, token-friendly jurisdiction like the Cayman Islands. Its sole job is to issue the tokens and manage the treasury. It's the guardian of the ecosystem's assets. Then, completely separate, you have your operating company, or OpsCo. You might find this works best where your team is actually based, perhaps the UAE or Portugal. This company is the engine room. It handles development, marketing, and all the day-to-day business operations. The beauty of this setup is that it elegantly isolates risk and optimizes your entire structure. The foundation's treasury is protected from business liabilities, and the OpsCo is set up for maximum operational and tax efficiency. It's a clean, robust way to build. So, how do you put all this into practice? What I do is break the decision down into a practical framework. First, you have to be brutally honest about your token's primary function. Is it pure utility? governance, or does it lean towards being a security? Your answer here is the starting point for everything. Second, profile your ideal investors. You might find that institutional funds are comfortable with established places like Cayman, while a community-focused raise gives you more creative options. Next, what I like to see is a real-world map of your operational needs. Where is your team, and where will you need banking and hiring capabilities? The best legal hole might not be the best place to run the day-to-day. And finally, and this is the most important part, hire experts. Seriously, engage specialized legal and tax advisors before you make a decision. This isn't the place to cut corners. It's the best money you'll spend. So where is all this heading? What I'm seeing now, and what I advise every founder to watch, is a clear trend towards global regulatory convergence. The days of hunting for obscure loopholes are coming to an end. You can see it with major frameworks like MiCA rolling out across Europe, and the FATF's travel rule becoming a global standard. What this means is that the nature of arbitrage is changing. You might find the critical question is shifting from where can I find the least regulation to where can I find the best regulation. What I like to see is this new mindset. It's becoming a race to the top. Jurisdictions are now competing to offer the most efficient, clear, and respected systems. The future isn't about finding a clever loophole. It's about choosing a high-quality partner jurisdiction that gives your project long-term stability and global legitimacy. All right, let's wrap up this deep dive. If there's one thing you take away from today, it's that choosing your jurisdiction is not an afterthought. It's the bedrock. What I always do is measure any potential home base against that core triad: regulation, tax, and reputation. You have to nail all three. And what I'm seeing with the most sophisticated projects is that a two-entity structure, that foundation plus OpsCo model, often provides the most robust foundation for growth. One piece of advice that is absolutely non-negotiable, however, is to bring in specialized legal counsel from day one. So now that we've established where you might plant your flag, the next logical step is to figure out how you actually raise capital. That's our focus for episode 5, where we'll dissect the legal instruments of a token sale, the SAFT, the SAFE, and the token warrant. I'll see you there.